So let me take one step back. I'll address the overall business agenda, but first let me address Silicon Valley. I mean, I do live in San Francisco, and I've lived in California for 40 years or more. And people love to write about people in Silicon Valley who are actually Republicans and support Mr. Trump. It's sort of a man bites dog story.
Andreessen Horowitz came out too.
Right. And so, but to a very large extent, the Valley remains what I would consider a moderate Democrat.
Yep.
Very business oriented, very data driven, very liberal socially, and overwhelmingly, in my mind, still supportive of Kamala Harris for the next president.
Welcome to Leadership Next, the podcast about the changing rules of business leadership. I'm Diane Brady.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Tom Steyer. Tom, thank you for being here.
Diane, it's great to be here with you.
You built this massive hedge fund. Would it go from 6 million to more than 20 billion, I think, in 25 years? So kudos to you for that. Talk a little bit about the role of government, because I don't want, I know that you ran, obviously, to be the Democratic candidate in the last election. The Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, clearly those have been factors potentially as catalysts toward the green economy. How important is it that we get a certain regime in, because business is moving in this direction anyway?
I mean, I wrote a book basically making the point that this is an economic opportunity, and the only way it's going to happen is by winning in the marketplace. So I'm an absolute believer in business, an absolute believer in capitalism. But having said that, this has to be a public-private partnership. So if we can take a step back and talk about why we're talking about this at all, do we need to talk about an energy transition? Why is this not just something that happens in the world of commerce without any conversation or politicization? Very simply, the world has run on fossil fuels for a long time, and the use of fossil fuels is very highly correlated with an increase in incomes for the people in those countries. So you can go back and see that we've gotten a lot richer as a people, not just in the United States, but around the world, as we've used fossil fuels. There was no intention to emit CO2. There was no intention to create global warming. There was no intention to have vast unintended consequences. But we did. So the real issue here is we have a huge industry polluting in a very destructive way, which they never intended to do, but which they're not paying for. And they love it. And who wouldn't? So it's like, of course they do. But the issue is, when we talk about government, okay, what is the IRA? It was basically subsidies for clean industry. So instead of taxing polluters, they're paying people to produce things that don't pollute. It's kind of a tax on its head, a subsidy for non-polluters.
Because the straight marketplace won't work. One quote I like from your book, that you're skeptical of any solution that requires humanity's collective heart to grow 3 sizes. Nice allusion to the Grinch there. But talk about our instinct to do the right thing. Is it just inertia? I mean...
Well, let me say this, and I'll give you an example, because this actually is happening. The statistic I think I like to use the most is this one. In last year, 2023, of new electricity generation globally, 86% of it was renewable. 14% of it was fossil fuels.
So the business case is compelling.
And the reason people did that, no one did that to be nice. There was no person who said, I'm willing to pay higher for clean energy. It turns out that solar and wind are much, much, much cheaper than natural gas. And that is a disparity that is only going to widen. If you look at as we all know, there is a $14,000 Chinese plug-in hybrid that will go 1,200 miles. From BYD. My point being, look, technology beats dead dinosaurs. And that is a spread. Batteries got 80% cheaper in the last decade. They'll get 80% cheaper again this decade. Solar costs are down to a penny per kilowatt hour. Are they going to go lower? Yes.
So that's the power of innovation. And
that's the power of business and commerce and intentionality. Yes, but there's a lot more to it than that. And the question is, how fast do we deploy the existing technologies? How fast do we create and deploy the new technologies in the problems that haven't been solved?
Can I go back a second to when you were building your business? Because you started on Wall Street.
I have a totally traditional financial background.
And it served you well, let's put it that way. But would you have been able to make money through the 90s, through the early aughts in any kind of climate investment? Or is it really that this moment in time? Because Galvanize started in 2021.
When Jimmy Carter was putting solar panels on the roof of the White House in the 1970s, that energy was far more expensive than fossil fuel energy. He was doing it for different reasons. He was doing it because of the oil embargo.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's much cheaper. I mean, what's happened is the costs have crossed. In new technologies, there's a thing called the S curve. Mm-hmm. So it's like you go along trying to get better than the existing technology. And when the cost curves and the efficiency cross, so now the new technology is better, it goes up like almost in a straight line and it levels out at about 80%. And that's going back to, replacing whale oil in the 1840s.
I want to pause because you are in San Francisco, so not necessarily of Silicon Valley, but around there. And Silicon Valley has been lukewarm at best to the Democrats, not because of the climate issues, but more because of antitrust and other regulatory issues. I know you're not in the government, so I don't want to make you a spokesperson for government, but how do you think about the overall business agenda?
So let me take one step back. Mm-hmm. I'll address the overall business agenda, but first let me address Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do live in San Francisco, and I've lived in California for 40 years or more, and people love to write about people in Silicon Valley who are actually Republicans and support Mr. Trump. It's sort of a man bites dog story.
Andreessen Horowitz came out too.
Right. And so, but to a very large extent, the Valley remains what I would consider it moderate Democrat.
Yep.
Very business oriented, very data driven, very liberal socially, and overwhelmingly, in my mind, still supportive of Kamala Harris for the next president. There are a group of people, many of whom have actually left Silicon Valley and now live in Austin or Miami, who don't like the way California's run, who don't like high taxes, and who are, as you said, worried about antitrust. Having said that, when I look back at what creates business success in my mind, the times when America was growing the fastest, we had very, very high marginal tax rates. Very high. Much higher than today, maybe double today. During Eisenhower, during Kennedy, during LBJ, we had really high marginal tax rates in this country. We didn't have the disparity in income. If you look at the simple, how much does the CEO of a company make compared to how much does the lowest worker in that company
it's like
make?
300 or 400 times now.
It was a fraction of that. It was a much more equal society in multiple ways. So I'm confident that this idea of low taxes, low government, everybody get out of the way, I mean, it just doesn't work. That is not the means for a successful society. If you look state by state, how people have done, look, I mean, people are very mad at California who don't live in California, but California has a really high, we're the 5th biggest economy in the world.
Yeah.
We have incredibly successful businesses. So to me, this whole idea that cut taxes, cut government, cut taxes, cut government, cut support, get rid of education, that can't help, get rid of, everything. I don't think that makes any sense. And so it has never worked. That's not what the data says. But if you have an income stream of X dollars and you can either tax it at 50% or 25%, people are like, I much prefer 25, that's much better.
Exactly. Human nature comes into play. One thing that maybe it's a symptom of the polarized times we're in, but business leaders are often remarkably silent on political issues. One, because you get very attacked now. It's quite transparent. Things go viral. I was speaking to Steve Ballmer the other day about his USA facts that he's trying to get out there to correct misinformation. I'd love to get your thoughts. Obviously, I know you've been in the political arena, but what is the role of business leaders in speaking up about these topics, climate change or otherwise?
Well, let me say what I would like my role to be.
Okay.
And how I perceive as a professional investor and professional business person, how I would like to.
Yeah.
And of course I have my opinions. just like the other 330 million Americans.
Yep.
But what I would like to do is have enough granular information that I can share accurately with elected officials and people in government so they can make better decisions. So if we're, I'm obviously focused on the energy transition and on climate, and I know that people in Washington, D.C. can't go to venture capital meetings on Sand Hill Road, but I can.
But are facts what drive decision-making in Washington?
Not always, I take your point, but I want the people who are making decisions to know the facts. And they can't get them on their own, that they just, 24 hours in the day, they have a full-time job, they can't do it. I view what I would like to do is to be able to say, this is what we're seeing. These are the actual numbers. You should know. This is what solar costs. This is where it's going. These are where batteries are going. You're looking at this technology for direct air capture. This is what we see in terms of the cost per ton of sequestration. This is what we see in terms of scalability. You can believe us or not. You can get your own experts. But we've looked at this seriously. We're investing basis on our research. Mm-hmm. That's what we see. You should take it into account.
It's interesting. We always talk about what the private sector can bring to the public sector. Efficiency, facts, getting things done. We rarely talk about what the public sector can bring to the private sector in terms of how you get things done. I'm curious, even your time on the campaign trail, were there any lessons gleaned from that you've taken into the world of business?
Well, let me say this, and you can see this very granularly this year. The people who are running corporations, particularly public corporations, believe that their career success, their jobs, their pay, and their integrity, very importantly, is based on increasing earnings for their shareholders. And so anytime they're telling you that there's something more important to them than increasing earnings for their shareholders, I would check my watch to see if they lifted it. They have a job to do with an integrity and a responsibility they take seriously. Those are not people who should be setting the agenda for this country. They should be setting the facts. Mm-hmm. They should be implementing. They should be working within the framework that elected officials, who are the embodiment of the people, set. And so, look, elected officials have a different responsibility. Their job, their integrity, their success, their reputation involves getting reelected or elected in the first place, which means satisfying people that they're representing in a significant way. That's their job. And so I try not to mix up those two different things. And I think that anytime you see someone in one of those spheres talking about how they're really concerned about the other sphere, you have to wonder if it's
decision making's different too.
Yes.
Right? So different.
And so I view it as, it's got to be the way the United States has traditionally worked. Is we're a democratic society. The will of the people rules. They set the rules. They should set the rules. That's our morality and integrity. And within that box, business people work.
So you call yourself an optimist. Let's drill down on that a little bit. Let's talk about the optimistic investor. Where are your biggest bets right now?
My old friend and partner, Katie Hall and I started a multi-strategy investment firm to invest into the energy transition in multiple strategies. So that includes venture and growth. It includes real estate, buying buildings and turning them to net zero. It involves public stocks, but we have plans to do many strategies because we believe this transition, as I said, inevitably has to happen, is happening very fast, that it's a huge tailwind to investing, so that there's a strong commercial argument that this is a place where people, professional investors with great experience, can marry that to domain expertise, specific knowledge of these markets, and get very good returns and also have great impact.
As a citizen, I suppose, are you worried about the state of democracy right now?
We obviously, from my standpoint, we have someone who has a real chance to be president, who tried to overturn the last election.
You paid $10 million, I think, to try and, in the impeachment battle, I remember that.
Who I think is, who has been convicted of 34 felonies, who has made multiple statements about what he would do in terms of the law and in terms of future elections if he's elected. It's a little hard to read between all the very confusing statements, but clearly somebody who, is not someone who loves elections, not someone who loves democracy, and not someone who respects it. So am I worried about that? I think that would be, a big threat to democracy. Do I believe that the American people will get back their democracy if we ever lose it? Yes. I believe it's built into us in a very deep way. It is built into me in a very deep way, and I'd be willing to go a very far piece to try and make sure we secure it. But is there someone running for president who has said things that are profoundly undemocratic and has made threats to our democracy repeatedly and said, talked about things he was going to, and then has lived up to it in the past? I think we all know that it's true. So that's scary.
Is there anything else on your radar right now you want to put on ours?
I would say this. I do think the technology is better than people understand in terms of climate. Our ability to solve these problems is much better than people understand. It's also true that the news from the natural world, which I follow obsessively, is worse than people understand, and in some cases, far worse and far scarier than people understand.
It's adaptability is as much as fighting climate change.
So I know this is a real race between the deterioration of the natural world that we all rely on and the incredible progress in the technological world. But if we win that race and you step back and think about where we're going to be as human beings, as Americans, we will be able to create a much better world than we've ever imagined. In terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of equality, in terms of all the important parts about life, we're going to have an ability, given the other advances that we're making, which are incredible, to really provide a way of living for the people in America and including people all over the world that is really almost better than we can imagine. And that's why I'm so focused on trying to make sure that we have a sustainable natural world, because we do depend on it. And if we don't, then we're not going to have time to focus on this, because we're going to live in a chaotic, dangerous, unhealthy, and scary world.
Living to 100 doesn't make much difference if you can't go outside.
And I'll give you one small example. I mean, one of the things that the UN projects is that on the course we are going, we will have 20 to 25 million climate refugees per year. Syria had 5 million refugees, partly related to climate, and that completely roiled Europe as they moved into different countries in Europe. 20 to 25 million refugees a year, every year. That is something that is a profound threat to the security of our political systems around the world.
So let's drill down a little on the actual technologies that you're investing in that you think are exciting right now.
So let me say this. We are deploying a lot of existing technologies like wind and solar and EVs and batteries that everybody knows about that are getting much better, but we all know that. What people don't know is that there are literally hundreds of new technologies being developed, not only to see if they work, but to see if they work at a price that works for customers. And that is a real difference. So for instance, one of the things that I find fascinating is, for a long time, we've had what's called geothermal energy. That's basically hot water under the earth. So if you think about Old Faithful in Yellowstone, the water comes up, it's hot, it's energy, you can use it, just the way you can use natural gas or wind or solar. What's changed is people are now using basically techniques from oil and gas to go down 5,000 feet. Not 500 feet, but 5,000 feet. And they're able to get completely clean base load energy. So there's no question about when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. It's always there. Base load energy that is completely clean, emits no CO2, and which is commercial. So it can be done at a price that competes. Now there's a real question about how big this can be, but this is one of 100 technologies where you go like, oh God.
Breaking down plastics. I've seen a lot of those as well.
I've seen techniques on plastics that are amazing. We know there's plastic pollution. We recycle only 6% of plastics. Only 6%, 94% does not get recycled. So the question is going to be, how are we, first of all, going to pick it out, sort it, and reuse it? There are amazing technologies going on in that. involving all kinds of different, skills and really incredible new machines. So as we see this, it's exciting to know that there's a machine that can look at this and pick out 10,000 different items. It's incredible. Humans can't do that. That's incredible.
So let me clarify. You invest in, so you're not investing seed capital, first of all. You're investing in these companies. Are you helping them to replicate at scale? Is that part of what you
Well, we're doing multi-strategy.
Right.
So we do seed.
Uh-huh.
We do venture and growth. We do real estate. I mean, what we're trying to do is figure out strategies where basically we can be really profitable in decarbonization. We're not concessionary. We're not asking people not to get good returns. We're not at all concessionary. In fact, we believe this transition is a tailwind that has to happen. It doesn't mean every company will succeed. You still have to be a professional investor. You have to have domain expertise in this area. You have to marry the two, and that's the strategy.
And doing good doesn't mean you can't make a good return.
If you're not getting a good return, you're not going to get a chance to do good.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Diane, thank you so much for having me.